Today, we're going to be talking about why we think the American dream is best lived outside of the US.
Hi, welcome to Entrepreneur Expat. This is Justin. I'm Amanda, and we are digital entrepreneurs with over 30 years of experience
Combined.
combined. And we are also currently expats living in Mexico, living the digital nomad life. On this channel, we talk about all things digital nomadism, expat life, geo arbitrage, global citizenship, entrepreneurship, online business, all those things. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we've got quite some lofty goals in terms of how much content we're going to be putting out on this channel to help you guys on your own entrepreneur expat journey. And speaking of which, we have a free gift for them, don't we?
Yes, we do. If you take a look below this video, you'll actually see a link to our guide on how to move to Mexico. We're actually updating that guide continuously. We're going to be releasing a new version very soon, probably by the time you watch this video. So definitely check it out. There's some pointers there as far as how to get started, how to connect with other expats, and some of the things that you need to do to move to Mexico successfully as an entrepreneur expat.
So let's talk a little bit about why the American dream is best lived outside of the US. This video was inspired by a couple of things. Number one, when we did our video on leaving the US will get harder for Americans, or moving to Mexico will get harder for Americans, it was one of the top performing videos we've had on this channel because a lot of people, given the climate in the United States right now, want to get out. So that was number one. Number two, over the weekend, we were just hanging out, relaxing, and we found this news segment. I think it was NBC who did it? Or
Yeah, CNBC or someone.
CNBC
Yeah.
or NBC. I can't remember the exact thing. We'll have to find it below. But they were interviewing this young lady who was just out of college, and she was moving overseas because the math wasn't mathing in the United States with her student loans, living in Washington, D.C., trying to find a job. Math wasn't mathing. So she is moving overseas to the Middle East to be with her sister. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting because when most people think about expat life, they think of retired people. But statistics are showing that a good portion of Gen Z actually is interested in moving overseas.
Yep.
Right now, which is a newer trend. Millennials, I mean, we've been talking about moving overseas as millennials. And then finally, the last thing was I posted very spontaneously on my Facebook on my 1 year anniversary of being in Mexico. I said 1 year in Mexico, and it's becoming more apparent that the American dream is best lived outside of America. And it was like almost 100 reactions, a bunch of comments, people started sharing it. It started a very interesting discussion in the comments. And I was like, yeah, I think most Americans are feeling some type of way about this American dream that we've been conditioned into and whether or not it's actually achievable in the United States.
The typical American dream is really this whole idea of you have a nice house, a white picket fence, what is it, 2.5 or 2.6 children, a dog, maybe a cat, and you're living pretty much free and clear of debt. You're not having to stress about money. Maybe one of the parents even stays home to take care of the kids.
You have a nest egg.
You have a nest egg, right? But that isn't really a reality for most Americans now, and I don't think it has been in at least the last 10 to 15 years, if not a lot more.
I would agree with that. Yes. Yeah. As a former financial writer, that's actually how I started an online business. I was a writer for financial companies. I did their content marketing. And I realized after 2008, I mean, I graduated college in 2010. But if anybody graduated into the Great Recession or anybody lived through the Great Recession, you should have already gotten the memo that the American dream in the United States was unattainable. But for some reason, a lot of people didn't get the memo.
It's almost like Stockholm Syndrome to a certain extent, because if you're in the U.S., especially in a place like California, everybody always talks about how great California is and how great the weather is and how there's no place like it. And America as a whole, I think, tends to talk about how there is no place better than the U.S. We're taught to believe from a very young age that the United States is the greatest country in the world. But the question that I ask is, greatest in what? It's definitely not greatest in mathematical ability. It's not greatest in healthcare. It's not greatest in safety.
It's actually 100 something in the world in terms of safety. Yeah.
So what is it that we've actually been taught? What are the beliefs that we've been taught? And are those things really true? Or are there maybe greener pastures out there? Amanda and I were talking about this, and she had a lot of thoughts on some of the specifics around the finances and how those sorts of things have been evolving over the last several years, and how it's not as viable as it used to be to actually have a very happy, successful, fulfilling life in the U.S. unless you're just inextricably wealthy, in which case there's probably also reasons to think about moving overseas, or at the very least having a plan B overseas
To diversify your wealth.
diversifying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But how does it affect the average American? I
The
think people
average
wanna know.
American, I mean, the average American can barely afford rent and groceries right now. And when we talk about that, because we've talked about that on the channel, news stories about how much it's costing just to live in the United States, just cost of living, we haven't even gotten into taxes and things like that.
Oh yeah, and taxes are insane. Now, you have to pay taxes almost anywhere you are. There's some exceptions, but
Yeah.
but in the U.S. itself, you're paying tax on money that you make. You're paying tax on payroll when you pay your employees. You're paying tax whenever you buy something at the store. You're paying tax when you buy a car, when you buy property, when you buy anything, and then you're paying tax just to own that thing, which completely goes against the concept of ownership. If you own a house, why should you have to pay thousands of dollars a year just in property taxes for that house? That makes no sense. And then on top of it all, now they're talking about introducing a wealth tax. And there's already, which is a tax on just money that you have in the bank.
After you pay everything.
After you pay all of the other taxes.
After
So your
you
money
pay
is
all-
taxed 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And then, of course, the cycle continues again. Whoever gets that money now also has to pay taxes on getting it and spending it and keeping it. And you pay capital gains tax, which is a lot, depending on how long you held that asset before you sold it. There's also an exit tax. If you have over, I believe, $2 million of net worth, the number changes all the time, but it's in the couple $1 million range. If you've got over that in net worth, then you actually have to pay a tax just to renounce your citizenship to the U.S. And now they're talking about introducing this whole crazy wealth tax as well.
Inflation is a form of tax because
That it
as
is.
things get more expensive, then businesses are just going to pass on the cost to the consumer, which in and of itself is a form of tax.
And it lowers the value of whatever is in your bank account.
Yes. So between inflation, taxes, and cost of living, Americans are feeling pretty damn tired of the situation. And a lot of Americans will say, oh, well, I think one of the most recent stats we saw was that Americans said they need $186,000 a year in order to live in the United States, even in places like Alabama and Mississippi, which, no offense if you're from Alabama or Mississippi, but I could live in a far more interesting location in the world for a fraction of that and actually get good health care and good quality food. So when Americans start becoming open to the idea of, wait a minute, I can find the things that I'm told I can find in the United States, I can actually find them elsewhere at a better price, then the conversation changes. So for example, I heard somebody bring this up. I would love your thoughts on this, actually. I heard somebody bring this up on YouTube with all the debates and all the craziness going on with the U.S. elections. We did a whole video on that that you guys can go check out. And somebody brought up, like, yeah, here's Joe Biden or the Republicans or these people or whoever saying, yeah, we really reduced the cost of healthcare and prescriptions in the United States. And this guy was saying, well, that doesn't mean anything when you can go to Malaysia and get 5-star healthcare at a fraction of the cost. Or you can go to Mexico, like we are right now, get very high quality private healthcare at a fraction of the cost. So when you take into account the fact that good quality care at an affordable price already exists in the world in other countries, then the argument doesn't seem very compelling anymore.
Yeah. People think, and this is probably going to be the next video that we do, people think that you just can't get what you can get in the U.S. outside of the U.S. Like, oh, will I be able to see a dentist that's quality? Like, Guadalajara, as an example, has some of the best doctors definitely in Latin America, perhaps some of the best doctors in this entire hemisphere. And the school even here down the street from us, I think it's called UNG, or I forget what, I think that was the Guadalajara. No, not Univa.
Not Univa.
Universidad Nacional Guadalajara. I think they have a really good medical school. It's one of the universities here, but they have a top-rated medical school.
I know they have nursing for
Yeah,
sure,
of course.
and a lot of people
but
study
Guadalajara is
medicine
world
here.
renowned for their medicine studies, and you can find great doctors. You can find great food that's cheap. You can find electronics if you need to buy electronics. You can find anything that you need here, and we'll talk about that in another video. Just about how do I find a toaster? How do I find
a washing machine?
A washing machine. Can you get Amazon here? Like all those other things. But yeah, like when you look at the reality, when you look at the numbers, when you look at what actually is possible outside of the U.S., one of the things that for us is probably the most important is that we're running a business. We're actually building a few different businesses right now and launching different brands, including this one. And if we were in the U.S. and we were burdened by all of the costs there, not just costs of doing business, but all of the lifestyle costs to live the way that we do right now in Guadalajara, it would be very difficult to actually put as much focus and attention on our business without feeling completely out of our mind, stressed out with everything on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I can say a specific example. A lot of people talk about hiring in the United States and how difficult hiring in the United States has become, which is placing a burden on business owners. I, one per time, hired somebody from New York City, and the amount of freaking taxes I had to pay as the employer because they were based out of New York City was absurd. Absurd. It was state tax, city tax, this tax, that tax. And then on top of that, New York State had the gall to send me a $5,000 bill like 2 months later because I did not fill out a piece of paperwork that I did not know existed in order to hire somebody from New York. And then when I said, I'm not paying this, I didn't know this existed. I went through your whole process. I didn't see this paper anywhere. Then they said, okay, well now the bill's going to be $11,000 for not filing one piece of paper. And I ended up not paying that because my accountant got me out of it. But when you think about that, when you think about the cost of doing business, the cost of living, the cost of just existing in the United States, just the financial cost is enough to start weighing on a mental cost, which is another issue in the United States that I know you have a lot to say about that because the United States is struggling from the mental health perspective.
It definitely is, and this is attributed not just to what's going on financially and the changing times as far as what we talked about earlier, which is this whole American dream idea of how it's really just easy and straightforward. If you just follow the steps, you can be prosperous. Go to school, get a degree, get a nice high-paying job. You're gonna have more than enough to buy a house. That was what we're sold. But exactly, it's that mental aspect as well, the mental health aspect. One of the reasons, if you look at the differences in culture, even between the U.S. and places like Latin America or even Europe, here we can see how close-knit the communities are with each other, with your neighbors, with especially your family, with your significant other. In the U.S., people are just very spread out. You don't really run into your neighbors a lot. People, even if they have a social circle, it's hard to find both the time and the money to actually go out to do things there, to spend time with friends, to build those connections. And then the other thing is the depth of the connections is not anywhere near as deep as it is because they tend to base relationships and connections on things like, what do you do and how much do you make and what kind of car do you drive? And there's a lot of superficialness going on.
And I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with making money. Make money. You are an entrepreneur. And I also want to be clear that the way that this works is if you earn in US dollars or euro or Australian dollars or Canadian dollars, and then you start living in other countries or you start diversifying, the United States is great for making money. It's still great for that. Some people would argue it's gotten more challenging and more difficult, like with the example I just gave you about hiring. So some people would argue that. But generally speaking, you can still make really good money in the United States and from American clientele. The problem is if you stay in the United States and you live in the United States, you're not keeping the money that you're making. So that's where a lot of people are starting to realize that the math is not mathing. And that's why a lot more people, especially those who've moved overseas, are saying things like the American dream is best lived outside of America, because now I have the cash flow to actually make this happen.
To buy property, to live well and eat healthy food, to have nice gym memberships, all those
Good
different
quality
things.
healthcare, even basic, just good quality healthcare. You don't have to go into a panic every time somebody gets sick or
Or your
somebody
tooth
needs to go to the
breaks,
doctor or your tooth break.
your pet gets sick.
You don't have to go into a
Yeah.
panic attack when those things happen like you would in the United States. And to put this in perspective, we have a friend who we're going to be interviewing on this channel. I was just chatting with her, and she visited us, and she lived in Austin, Texas. And she was telling us that to live in Austin, Texas as a single woman, running a business, she runs a consulting business, and just living like basic needs was almost $10,000 a month
That's incredible.
as a single woman. Now, she has since left the United States. After visiting us, she's like, nope, I'm leaving. I could see why you guys are not going back. I wouldn't go back either. But, now she's in Panama. She'll be in Mexico in a couple days. Then she's heading out to Europe. She experienced it herself for a while when she stayed with us. And she goes, the math doesn't math in the United States. You can take that money and have a much higher quality of life and actually have your basic needs met at a high quality standard in other countries. Especially with a country like Mexico. I saw somebody post this today that they were afraid of Mexico and Latin America because they're afraid of all the cartel violence. So a lot of Americans just feel like either they can't get what they need, or there's violence everywhere, or that, they have the best healthcare in the world, which they absolutely do not. Like, every ranking in the world none of them put the United States.
The irony, though, about being afraid of the cartel violence outside of the U.S. is that they just caught the second in command for the Sinaloa cartel.
In the
I think
United
it was,
States.
Was it El Chapo's son?
I don't know, El
Or
Mayo.
nephew?
I don't know.
No, El Mayo was the other
No,
guy.
I think they caught this.
Them.
They caught two of them.
Yep.
In the
in
United States.
Chicago.
In
or
Chicago.
No, they were in El Paso, I think. But then
they
were
got
extradited
transferred.
to Chicago.
Then they got transferred to Chicago. So the irony of that is a lot of Americans are afraid of cartel violence in the United States, and they don't realize that they're already in the United States.
Yeah. Here, to be honest, the inner cities of a lot of places here are a lot more calm than the inner cities of a lot of places in the U.S. And I've said that before, but it's worth mentioning again. Come to Mexico. Come to Colombia. Come to any place, let's say in Central Europe, and you'll see like things work here, and we have peace and stability and security and a lot less political tension. You just have to actually take that leap and go and see other parts of the world, but not just from a tourist perspective. Don't go to Puerto Vallarta and stay in a 5-star resort. Maybe stay in like an Airbnb instead, or rent an apartment for a few months and see how you like it. Travel around, come to Guadalajara, go to Mexico City.
Go to the dentist.
Go to the dentist,
Just make a quick dental appointment while you're... A lot of Americans do that. They'll be like, hey, I'm going to Puerto Vallarta on vacation and I'm going to the dentist. Like, try doing something like that.
You'll actually probably save as much on that dental appointment as your entire vacation will cost. So there's that.
Yeah, you can.
Or come to one of our retreats, and it's a write-off too. We're going to be doing those soon.
Yeah, so make sure to sign up for the email list for when we're ready to announce those. You guys can buy up tickets as soon as we have them available. But any final thoughts on the American dream being easier to achieve outside?
It's all
of
branding,
America?
right? It's all branding. It was all, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was basically like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac trying to sell more loans in, what was it, the 70s, 60s? That's how all that originally started. Like
Yeah,
this
the
whole
banks were
American
just trying to make money
dream.
off
Yeah,
of people,
it was
which was the whole mortgage thing.
the whole mortgage thing, which fueled what they call the American dream, and you should own property. Most of the time, a single family residence that you live in is not actually a good investment. Nor would I say that necessarily is the American dream, because now you have a house, you own a house, you live in one place, you're kind of stuck there. Yeah, it might go up in value, it might not, it might go down, who knows? We may be near the top of the market already. But that whole American dream thing was really just branding from the U.S., from banks specifically, to try to sell more loans and make money off of people, which, it is what it is, but that's the reality of the situation. And what even people would perceive as the American dream, with home ownership, with lifestyle, with financial wherewithal, with health, and all these other things that made it the American dream, might have been something that was possible 25 or 30 years ago. But today, we really do feel exactly, as we said earlier, that the American dream is best lived somewhere else.
Well, thank you for listening to us wax poetic on this one today. We hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us get it in front of more people. This community is growing so fast, and a lot of it has to do with you guys leaving comments, giving the thumbs up, sharing. We had a lot of shares on our content. I don't know who is sharing it, but thank you for all of you who are sharing it, because we were looking at our analytics and this thing is taking off like wildfire. So thank you so much. And if you are interested in starting your entrepreneur expat journey in Mexico, it is the first stop for a lot of people. We have a free guide to help you out, which you can find below, and we will catch you guys on the next one.